Good morning, Bacon Academy. Coming up on today's show, the book fair begins, a hunger strike in Guantanamo Bay, and we learn that Elvis might not have tried to murder the president after all. All that and more now on the Bacon Academy Student News. Today is Wednesday, April 24th, 2013. I'm Bernie Denler. Used prom dresses are on sale for just $10 all week. Students who would like to purchase one of the dresses should see Ms. Murphy or the clothing seminar students. Students who would be interested in donating dresses are also encouraged to do so. The annual Scholastic Book Fair at Bacon has opened and will run through next Monday. It is open to students from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. with special shopping hours for parents and staff from 6:30 a.m. to 7:15 a.m. These special shopping hours will also include free Starbucks coffee. The book fair accepts cash, check, and credit cards. Connecticut's Supreme Court is set to hear arguments regarding the constitutionality of the state's death penalty repeal. The repeal of the death penalty last year applies only to future crimes, those committed after April 24, 2012, with the 11 men currently on death row still set for execution. Arguments will be heard in the case of Eduardo Santiago, who was convicted of murder in 2000. The court's ruling in this case will ultimately determine whether the state's repeal law will bar them from executing the other 10 inmates also currently on death row. Turning to national news, charges against the man suspected of sending letters laced with ricin, a highly toxic protein powder that is deadly to humans, have been dropped. Originally, investigators believed that Paul Kevin Curtis, an Elvis impersonator, was responsible for mailing the potentially deadly letters to President Obama and Mississippi Republican Senator Roger Wicker, but now believe he may have actually been framed. 19-year-old Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the surviving suspect in last week's bombing of the Boston Marathon, is reportedly responding despite his critical injuries and has now been formally charged with using a weapon of mass destruction. Although he still cannot speak, he is communicating with investigators via writing. Investigators hope that Tsarnaev will be able to help them understand what motivated this attack, which surprised many of even his closest friends, who saw him as an ordinary American teenager. Prosecutors are expected to seek the death penalty. The U.S. military reports that over half of the prisoners at Guantanamo Bay are on a hunger strike. The hunger strike began in February with a few prisoners who were protesting conditions and their indefinite confinement at the U.S. military base in Cuba. The strike grew over the past week after a fight between guards and prisoners. Now, 84 of the 166 prisoners are refusing to eat. At least 16 of them are being force-fed, and 5 have been hospitalized. Officials in Nigeria reported that the fighting between the Nigerian military and Islamic extremists has killed at least 185 civilians in a fishing community. The battle began on Friday in Baga, which sent people fleeing into the arid scrublands surrounding the community on Lake Chad. The attacks included rocket-propelled grenades from the insurgents and machine gun fire from the military. Homes, businesses, and vehicles were eventually burned out when the government finally felt it was safe enough to see the destruction. Everyone has been in the bush since Friday night, said Bashir Issa, a grocer. We are still picking the corpses of women and children in the bush and creeks. Israeli officials are claiming that they have found evidence that the Syrian government continuously used chemical weapons last month, asserting that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was testing the United States and how it would react. In making the declaration, Israeli officials argued that President Assad had repeatedly crossed what President Obama had said last summer would be a red line. The Obama administration pushed back, saying that they would not leap into any conflict with what they viewed as inconclusive evidence. An international rights group is accusing authorities of Myanmar of organizing a campaign of ethnic cleansing against the country's Rohingya Muslim population. Human Rights Watch asserts that a series of attacks last year that killed hundreds of people and forced thousands from their homes were crimes against humanity that the government of President Thein Sein has yet to punish. State security forces sometimes intervene to protect fleeing Muslims, but more often than not, they ignore the attacks or participate them directly, according to Human Rights Watch. In science news, the National Health and Family Planning Commission reported that a total of 108 H7N9 avian flu cases have been reported in China, including 22 that have ended in death. Unlike the H5N1 bird flu that raised concerns in 2003, H7N9 does not seem to make birds very sick or even sick at all. This makes tracking the movement of the virus and containing it to limited flocks of birds very difficult. It has already spread to multiple provinces throughout China. Finally, it appears that a small meteorite was responsible for the mysterious boom that shook the Connecticut shoreline last weekend. Larry Beck was sitting in his living room watching TV when out of nowhere, the space rock burst through his ceiling across the room. The flight of the rock was stopped by a copper pipe somewhere in the walls of Beck's home. At first, Beck thought it was a piece of debris that had fallen off an airplane hull, but upon closer investigation, meteorologists were able to determine that the rock is, in fact, extraterrestrial in origin. The meteorite has since been brought to the Yale Peabody Museum for further examination. That's all for today. Join us again tomorrow for more school, local, national, and world news. And remember, you can catch us online too at youtube.com/BA Student News.